My name is Penny and welcome to Copper Tree Acres. If it's your first time here, we are a 4-acre small pecan farm located in southeast Arizona, and we are in zone 8A. So we're just getting going with some heat at times, and then the winds have been crazy, so it's really put off getting a lot of our starts out into the garden beds. We've kind of been hesitant because the winds have been so severe, and this time of year it just kind of is the case. So until we have a high tunnel, we're using low tunnels the best we can, or creating those as we go along. This is our first season market gardening, so we're just now expanding our garden bed plots to be able to grow more. And this is our first year soil blocking. So if you haven't seen my first video, I literally just started soil blocking in February of this year and of 2023. And I wanted to go over with you today how I basically created a way to make a 4-inch soil block for anything that needs to be potted up. Maybe you're waiting on something that you've got to get out in the garden, but it's outgrown its 2-inch block or what have you. I didn't want to spend the money on a 4-inch blocker this year because we've already invested a lot of energy and time and resources on getting our seed room and lights and everything set up for market gardening this year. And so I wanted to create a way that I could pot up my tomatoes and peppers possibly until they're ready to go out. Not because I plan to pot up a lot of things. It takes a lot of soil to pot up this much, and I don't recommend setting yourself up to where you've grown things so long that you have to then pot up from a 2-inch all the way to a 4-inch. But when you need to, you need to. And so instead of purchasing the $100 or so soil blocker this year for the 4-inch, I created one, and I wanted to just show you guys that today in case that can help you out. This is our 4-inch. Got this little bitty 3¼ inch that I started this tomato in, and then I blocked it up. I potted it up to a 2-inch, which has a dibble that has a 3/4 inch block in there, set up for it. And here's the same thing I did with this pepper, and you'll see the air pruning, nice roots going on. I'm going to be potting these up into 4-inch blocks soon before I get them out to the garden, most likely. Now, I just recently finished my tomatoes into the 4-inch block, and I'm planning on planting those out sometime next weekend, which will be, today's the 15th of April. So we are right at our last frost date, approximate last frost date. So we still could get some freeze, and I don't want to take that chance. So I'm kind of just giving it a little bit more time so I can look at that 10-day forecast for the future and make sure that the tomatoes can go out, but they are ready to go otherwise, except for hardening off, which starts tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning I'm going to start hardening them off and putting them out each day, a little bit longer each day over a course of a week or so, and then I'm going to get them in the garden beds. We're going to be building a trellis for our tomatoes. I'll be doing a video on that as well, a little trellis system. But in the meantime, I just want to show you guys how this works, and it's so far been pretty fantastic. And I'll give you some footage of where we started with the tomatoes and then how we've been potting them up along the way. So you'll see them into a 2-inch and then these 4-inch, and they have been just doing phenomenal. Now, I do use a little bit of fertilizer once a week, but I use like a flour mix that is a 1-5-1, so that it's not too much nitrogen, and they're getting plenty. We had great germination on pretty much all of our tomatoes. I was really surprised. We buy really good seed. It's organic seed from High Mowing and from Johnny's Select Seeds. So we do not, I didn't just use whatever seeds. I think I did a couple ones from Seeds of Change just to try them out. And then I maybe had a couple heirloom varieties, I believe, that I have them all written down, that the ones that I actually planted. We're just going to be putting them in one bed, and we're going to be putting up the trellis. Whatever might not fit in there, we're going to put somewhere else. I'm really not that concerned about it. I'm not growing tomatoes this year for market per se. If I have an abundance, which I believe I will, because these are all indeterminate varieties, which means they'll continue growing and producing, throughout the season, and they won't just give me one yield and one and done. So we're going to use what we need, and then whatever I have left we'll be using at market, basically, is kind of how it's going to work. So we're just starting small. We're starting our market garden small, honestly. So we're just getting our feet wet with all of this, and without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. I'm going to show you my blocking mix that I use for the larger blocks. In my last video I went over the blocking mix that I use for my small 3/4 inch blocks, the minis. And in this one, I'm going to show you what I use for the 1 inch, I think it's 1.5 inch, and then the 2 inch blocks, and then that same mix is what I use for these 4 inch blocks. So I've already sifted my peat and my compost. This peat's not as forgiving as this other peat I used. And again, I'm going to try out coconut coir once I'm done with this peat. I'm going to buy some coconut coir and try that out, or at least do partial coconut coir and partial peat, just to start getting away from using any peat, since it's not sustainable, supposedly. So a couple buckets there to start. Ultimately, we're going to have, I think, 4. I gotta look at my recipe. I've only made this a couple of times now. This is my sifted compost. We're trying out a new sifter too, and I'll be putting that up on a video. We're making a new sifter that's bigger. So if you're interested, I'll put that up when we get it finished. We're going to put a bucket of compost in, and I'm going to mix that around. That mixing. You want to get that mixed well. And then, okay, so we're going to add the amendments, and then we're going to finish adding the soil components. So this is Azomite, which is a rock dust. So it's basically, rock dust is just minerals. Lots of minerals that give, it's like 71 trace minerals if I recall correctly. And we've used it in our garden beds, especially our garden beds when we're first initiating a new garden bed, regardless of what the soil test tells us, just because it adds so many good minerals. And your plants are going to uptake what they need if they're given enough phosphorus. So this is just something great to add into your soil blocks. Then that goes into your soil. Now, this block mix for the larger blocks calls for 3 cups of Azomite. Azomite's cost has gone up immensely. So I am only using 1.5 cups. And so that's half of what it calls for, and my blocks have been doing fine. My plants have been doing fine. And that's the way that I am saving on some money, so that I can actually put Azomite directly in my new beds and have some left to do that. Then this is the green sand again that we used in the mini blocks. This is 1 cup of green sand, and that is what the recipe for this calls for. The reason I'm going with the green sand is it was a little bit more affordable and is so super good for the fertility of your soil blocks. So you don't really want to scrimp on that if you can avoid it. I mean, you can scrimp on it a little bit, play around with it, you can cut back, and just see how, you know, if your plants are only going to grow in a block for 3 weeks before you maybe put it out to harden off, you're probably fine to cut back a little bit on the green sand. But remember, any amendments you're going to put in these soil blocks are going to go directly into your garden as well and help it further along. So you don't want to scrimp on them too much. So I just mix all that in before I mix in the rest of the perlite and the peat and the compost. You can pretty much mix this however you want. Elliot Coleman has a strict recipe in his book, so you can definitely follow that. And I would recommend it, especially if you have any issues in the future with your blocks not doing well. But we haven't had too many problems mixing stuff in kind of randomly. So it's going to call for 2 buckets, 2 10-quart buckets of perlite. I'm going to mix these in as I go because it's so lightweight and we have a lot of wind today. I want to try to get it mixed really well before I add in 2 more buckets of peat and half a bucket more of compost. So you want to sift this with either a mask on, or not sift it, you want to mix it with either a mask on, or you want to just, take it slow so that you're not breathing in all of the dust. We have so much wind today, I'm not too concerned about the dust too much. It's kind of blowing away from me. All right, we got that pretty good. So now we're gonna go with our next run of peat here. So we have 2 more buckets of peat. Now mind you, this mix is gonna make up for around 400 2-inch blocks. Okay, so that's the biggest block besides the 4-inch. And so you want to just remember, you don't need as much. It's good to mix this up and just have it made so that when you do need more, it's just better to do it in big amounts. But if you don't plan on doing as many, then maybe cut your recipe in half and keep it made up. We're not going to be making 400 blocks today, but I'll be making some 4-inch blocks for the tomatoes. So I wanted to show you guys how I do that, and I make those without a 4-inch blocker. I'm going about another half of compost. I'm going to see how it turns out. I got to get this kind of mixed, and then I'm going to add in my last bucket of perlite. And I'll give you guys a recipe in the description. Mix this with obviously a little scoop or a shovel or something if you want. But kind of like getting my hands in the dirt. Tend to do that often around here. All right, I'm almost done. What I'll do is store this in a tote, whatever I don't use. And that way it's all made up. Because one of the biggest things you'll notice if you're just beginning soil blocking and you do stick with it is that when you need to use it, you want it made up already. So it's best to do it on a day you're not making any blocks and you've got a little extra time. And then when you do need to make blocks all of a sudden and you need to get some things planted, you just have it ready to go. Because I noticed that is one thing that'll hinder me from getting my seeds started. So if I don't have soil block and I just don't have time to sift and then make the block mix up and all that gets in the way. Last bucket of perlite as the wind picks up. Let's get this mixed in before it takes off on us. All right, so we have a little bit of amendments in there. We got the compost, which is also going to give it some nutrients. I'm just going to see how this mixes up. I might add a little more compost. Because in the mini blocks, you have 16 cups of peat to 4 cups of compost.
Voila.
Okay, so I ended up adding in another half bucket of compost, so for a total of 2 buckets of compost to 4 buckets of peat and 2 buckets of perlite, and then the amendments. So we're going to see how this goes. It's I believe a little bit more compost than I used last time, slightly, but I think that's going to make up for the little bit of compression you get using the perlite. So we're going to make up some of this mix. Now the water that I'm using, I meant to mention this in my last video, is filtered water. I have a water filter attached to the hose that I got on Amazon, so I'll put that on the list. I believe I put that in my show notes of the last video. Water filter basically takes out chlorine, and that's your main thing you're looking to take out. Obviously it's a good filter for some other things as well, but I'm just looking to make sure I take chlorine out of the water. so that I'm not killing off microbes in my soil when I water my plants. So that I pretty much put it on one of my hoses in here that I use for this for sure, and watering the starts. I think you really want to focus on that. Now, if you can't afford a filter and you want to avoid the chlorine, then just set yourself out a bucket of water, and it's like 20, I want to say it's like 24 hours, you can look it up, it takes for chlorine to kind of burn off outside. So you can put a bucket of water out from your tap or, you know, from your hose, and just let it sit out long enough, and you can keep kind of rotating buckets out of water or pitchers so that you always have a supply of water that's, you've at least let the chlorine burn off before you use it. So that's another way of saving money if you don't want to buy a filter, or if you're not making a ton of starts, you're doing a small garden and you just don't want to deal with a filter. Although watering your garden with a filter on your hose is best. So this is just kind of a bigger batch. It's easier to use my hands. But you see this is still real dry. But we're getting there. Again, you can kind of keep track of, for me, I'm going to keep track this time. I did 2 buckets full of my mix. I did 2 pitchers so far, so it looks like it's going to take about 3 pitchers probably will do it of water. I want to get this all put in. And we'll squeeze it real good. See if anything's coming out. Nothing's coming out yet. So this is a 4-inch block that I made a while ago. I would say these are about 3 weeks old. So you'll see you start to get dry on top, and that's perfectly fine. Not that big of a deal. If it gets too much, I typically start to top water just a little bit, but most of the time you want to always water, you know, bottom water. But when you need to, you can just kind of lightly water the top, and that's what I've been doing. But at this point, I want to add some soil because these aren't going to go out for about another week. I need to wait till our bed is ready and the winds die down a little bit. We've just been having some severe winds, and I don't want to put these guys out until we're past that. We're just now getting to our last frost date. And so what I do is I spray it, and I just put a little bit of the same block mix that I would use to make the blocks in the first place, which is the larger block mix that we're working on today. But see, you can just get a nice refresh on the top if necessary, or if you start to get thin here, if the plant starts to get thin, it starts to lean, you can just add. Because as you know, tomatoes will grow more roots as high as you put the soil. So you can just kind of sturdy up the plant at the same time, or refresh the top on your 4-inch soil blocks anytime just by adding a little bit. And then I'll kind of spray it down a little just to kind of get it to settle. No big deal, doesn't take that long. You can keep your plants nice and happy. While you're at it, you might want to pull off any suckers that you see. I'll just set it over here with the other group. Okay. Back to checking the soil after, let it sit about a half hour. You can let it sit overnight, really, even check it the next day. It's really going to saturate that. We're kind of getting there. We got a little water coming out, just not enough. So this is the last of the third. This is the other half of the third pitcher, and I think this is going to do it. So 2 buckets, 3 pitchers of water, I'm filling it to the 48 ounce. Enough. It's still a bit dry, but I just don't want to go overboard because I want to be able to use it right now. Possibly a little dry, but I believe it's going to keep saturating. And I'm just going to test it out on one of these to see how good we're doing here. So what I have here and what I've been using is this 4-inch, as you can see, it's a 4-inch container that I got a plant in a while ago. I've kept all of mine. And this says gourmet grown. So that's a registered trademark. So you may be able to find someone who is selling gourmet grown pots, or you can look for, yeah, because we've got gourmet grown. So this pot with this squared, rounded edge square shape is what I've been using. That's been working really good. Now you could use something round, but I think you're gonna have a little bit more of an issue using something round. So if you can find yourself 4-inch pot, this is what I've been using. So I start by just pressing it in like you would if you're pressing your soil block in. And I just get it real good. Now you could get yourself a block of some sort, say a block of wood or something to really get it pressed, that you could push down on there, something flat. But so far I've just been kind of going around and I just push in on it. And I press it in enough, real tight, so that I can see on this other end. What you're gonna look for is your water starting to come up, see? See how I'm starting to get some moisture? You want your block to be nice and set, but you also don't want it to be too compacted. So this feels good. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more because it's gonna push down. And when we go to actually add the 2-inch block in there, you've got to be able to cut into the top and have it stay together. So that's why you want to press into it really good. Start to see that water. There you go. So you got it full enough here, just about to the top. You don't have to go to the top. You can even make them a little shorter if you want to. But that's nice and solid, pressed in there. And then what I do is, so I just drop it on there until it comes out. And then I just carve my way to a 2-inch block. Now sometimes the whole top wants to cave in and come off, and that's fine. You can actually cut the top off and just form it around the 2-inch block. But we're gonna try to keep some in place. So this is just, I kind of do it quick. I leave a little in the top. You can use a spoon even. This is just an old butter knife that I keep out here. A spoon might work better. I just haven't, like once you get to this point, but you want to make it deep enough. You're almost about halfway down this block to be able to get your 2-inch in there. Okay. Now you've got your edges still on here. You're probably going to lose some trying to put the block in. So you just want to kind of, this is why you want your mix wet enough, but not too wet, so that it stays together. And then we're just going to take one of our 2-inch blocks. So starting to lose a little fertility, so this is good. And then what we're going to show you is that air pruning going on. So you can see how you have this great set of roots that are getting plenty of air flow, which tomatoes surely need. And you're getting your nutrients because you're putting a little bit of nutrients once a week in your water, and then you also have the nutrients from the soil block mix. And I just hit this, so I kind of caved some in. So you're just gonna put that in there, and there you have yourself the beginnings of a 4-inch block. You take the rest of what you just took out and you just neatly form it on there. You can use your bare hands if you want. I usually, most of the time, do actually. My hands are always dried out, but you can straighten it up a little bit. And again, you can add to the top as needed. If you start to need, if the plant starts to get a little too tall, you can add soil around the top. Now at this point, I got a little side here that needs a little more, so I'm going to grab a little more and I'll be right back. So I just got a little handful there. You're just gently pressing it around it, forming another type of mud cake here. A nice little round bundt cake, let's call it, or I don't know what you would call this. A little dumpling. There you go. So now what we're gonna do is set that on our tray. We got a little bit of a leaner on this one, and you can correct that as you're planting it, but as it grows up, it's not that big of a deal. And you'll start to see that this will green up now that we've got it back in another block of fertility. And a little bit more soil again, and it'll start growing. All right, we'll try and do one that's a little straighter. And I'm gonna show you one that has been in the 2-inch block too long and has started to curve on me, and kind of how we'll work on correcting that. We can always try using this as our press too, which is good, but I like to feel how compact I have it. But that's good. Use that. Just want to make sure you're really packing it in at the end, because that's what's going to help you to have that stability when you're cutting into the top. Okay. Yeah, I didn't press this one quite as tight, so we might have a little bit more loose stuff on top. I'm going to go a little deeper on this because I want to show you a curved one and how I try to start correcting that. It's not that big of a deal because honestly, once we put them out there, we're going to put them on a line. They're going to be trellised and they're going to curve down at the bottom anyway, because these are indeterminate tomato plants. So they'll keep growing taller and taller. So we have to keep dropping them down once they get to a certain height and just let them curve at the bottom. And I'll just keep you guys posted on that, how it's going. We will still let them curve down and drop down. Okay, losing a little bit of our edge, but that's okay. If we lose one side, that's fine. We can always add it. It's just easier to try to keep a couple sides at least. So let's go ahead and take one of our 2-inch. We show you again. Got nice roots coming in, and then we just have it curved out. So we're gonna try to slide that in there, lose a little bit of the top, and we're gonna try to correct it so it starts to kind of come up a little bit. It's just sat in this 2-inch a little bit long. That's okay, just been busy with a million other things. There we go. All right, there's that one. There we go. blocks that we'll be using as we go forward. Stay tuned if you're interested in seeing what we're going to put up for our trellis and how it works out, and the hardening off of the tomatoes, because that is the one thing I'm most concerned about, is that I'll fry them before I get them in the ground. So because the sun, we're up at an altitude of about 3,500 feet. No, actually we're close to 3,700 feet. So where we are, I've noticed since moving from the valley in Phoenix up here, I'm not used to the altitude. I've never lived in altitude at all. So what I've noticed is the sun is intense. So we might have less heat here more of the time, but it is very intense, bright sun. So you have to watch that you don't over photosynthesize, I guess, if you will, your plants too soon. So it's like a really gradual hardening off you have to do out here, even if it's not that hot. You just got to watch that you don't leave them out too long, because they just tend to like wilt over. I've had it happen a number of times now working on the start. So wish me luck in getting these hardened off properly and in the ground before they die on me, and then hopefully once they're in the ground they make it. This is my first time growing tomatoes out in this region, so we'll see how it goes. Until next time, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. See you guys soon. Take care. Remember, life is short, live it well. Bye-bye. Blessings.